The Alpha's discarded mate. She heard everything. Lena Virek stood frozen outside the war room, her hand still raised to knock. Through the heavy oak door, her husband's voice cut through the silence like a blade. The Virek girl, she's a treaty signature, nothing more. Kael's lieutenant laughed. You don't even visit her chambers. Why would I? She served her purpose at the altar. 3 months of marriage. 3 months of convincing herself that patience would build something real. And in 10 seconds, every fragile hope shattered. Stay with us until the end to see how she makes them all regret it. Like and comment what city you're watching from. The first time Lena Virek saw Black Hollow Fortress, she thought it looked like a grave. Gray stone walls rose from the mountainside, sharp and unforgiving, with narrow windows that seemed to watch rather than welcome. The sky hung low and colorless, pressing down on the jagged peaks that surrounded the stronghold. Everything here felt deliberate, built not for beauty, but for war. She'd arrived 6 weeks earlier in a carriage draped with the violet banners of her house, flanked by guards who wouldn't meet her eyes. The wedding had been arranged in 4 days, signed in 6. Her father hadn't even attended the ceremony. He'd sent a representative and a letter that said, "Do your duty." Duty. That word had defined her entire life. Lena was the third daughter of a minor house in the Southern Territories. Too far down the line to inherit, too well bred to ignore. When the border war between Black Hollow and the Virek coalition threatened to spill into full-scale slaughter, her name appeared on a very short list. A marriage alliance, a treaty sealed in vows instead of blood. She told herself it was an honor. She told herself she could make it work. Kael Thorne, Alpha of Black Hollow, had stood beside her at the altar in silence. He was taller than she'd expected, broad-shouldered and sharp-featured, with pale eyes that seemed to look through her rather than at her. His hand had been cold when he took hers, his voice flat when he spoke the vows. Afterward, there had been no celebration, no honeymoon. He'd nodded once, told her she'd have the East Wing, and disappeared into the fortress. She hadn't seen him alone since. At first, she'd convinced herself it was normal. He was an alpha. He had responsibilities, a territory to govern, a war to end. She was patient. She'd been raised to be patient. But patience, she was learning, had limits. The East Wing became her prison, though no one locked the doors. High ceilings, cold floors, tapestries that depicted battles she didn't recognize. Her chambers were spacious and well-appointed, furnished with dark wood and heavy curtains that blocked out most of the light. A 4-poster bed she slept in alone, a writing desk no one expected her to use, bookshelves filled with military histories and territorial maps. Nothing of hers. Nothing that felt like home. The servants were polite but efficient. They brought her meals, tended the fire, asked if she needed anything in voices that suggested they hoped she didn't. She learned their names. Maris, the older woman who managed the household staff. Jorin, the young man who brought firewood. Elva, who laid out her clothes each morning with brisk, impersonal care. None of them lingered. None of them talked. She was the Alpha's wife, and that made her untouchable in a way that had nothing to do with respect. Lena spent her days wandering the cold hallways of Black Hollow, trying to find a place she fit. The fortress was enormous, a maze of corridors and staircases that twisted through the mountain like veins. She explored cautiously at first, then with more purpose, mapping it in her mind. The armory, the training yards, the kitchens, the great hall where Kael held court. She watched people move through their routines, guards drilling in the courtyard, advisors hurrying between meetings, servants carrying supplies. Everyone had a role, a function. Everyone except her. She tried to make herself useful. She reviewed trade reports left in the library, cross-referenced them with tax records, and noted discrepancies. She suggested improvements to the supply lines, rerouting caravans to avoid the flooded southern pass, consolidating shipments to reduce costs. Kael's steward had accepted her notes with a thin smile. "Thank you, Lady Lena. Very thorough." The reports disappeared into a drawer. She never saw them again. She drafted a proposal to improve grain distribution to the border villages, citing inefficiencies she'd noticed in the records. She spent 3 days on it, checking her numbers twice, making sure her logic was sound. The steward thanked her again. Set the papers aside. Changed the subject. It wasn't cruelty. That would have required intention. This was something worse, a polite, systematic erasure. She was acknowledged, but not heard. Seen, but not recognized. She attended dinners in the Great Hall because it was expected. The long table seated 30, but she always sat at the far end, closest to the door. Kael took the head, surrounded by his lieutenants and advisors. They discussed patrols, supply issues, political maneuvering. She listened, occasionally offering input. The first time they'd paused, looked at her. Kael had nodded politely. An interesting thought. Then he turned back to his men and continued as if she hadn't spoken. After that, she stopped trying. She smiled when appropriate, nodded when expected, stayed quiet unless directly addressed, which was almost never. No one was rude, no one dismissed her outright. They just acted like she wasn't there. And slowly, carefully, she started to believe it. 3 months into this marriage, sleep became impossible. Lena would lie in the massive bed, staring up at the canopy, listening to the wind howl through the mountain passes. The shutters rattled, the fire in the hearth burned low. The shadows stretched across the walls like reaching hands. She'd pull the blankets tighter, but the cold always found her. It wasn't the temperature, it was something deeper, a chill that settled in her chest and wouldn't leave. The bond was there, faint, thread-like, stretched between her and Kael like a tether she couldn't cut. She'd felt it flare briefly during the ceremony, a sudden warmth that had made her breath catch. For a moment she'd thought she felt something from him. Recognition. Possibility. But it had faded almost immediately, settling into a low, constant hum she could barely sense. She tried reaching out through it once, late at night, focusing on the connection and sending a tentative thread of something. Hope, maybe. Curiosity. Nothing came back. The bond wasn't broken. It was just empty. Some nights she'd get up and walk. The fortress was different after dark. The guards changed shifts at midnight, leaving brief gaps in their rotations. The halls emptied. The noise of the day faded into something quieter, heavier. The stone seemed to breathe in the lamplight, ancient and patient. She'd wander without purpose, her slippers soundless on the floors, just to feel like she was moving toward something. Anywhere. It didn't matter. She walked past the kitchens, where the night staff prepared bread for the morning, past the library, where a single lamp burned in the window, past the training yard, silent and empty under the stars. Sometimes she'd end up in the gardens, a small, walled courtyard on the south side of the fortress. It wasn't much. A few hardy plants, a stone bench, a fountain that had stopped working years ago. But it was quiet, and the quiet, at least, didn't judge her. It was on one of those sleepless nights that everything changed. Lena had been walking for an hour, drifting through the corridors with no destination in mind, when she passed the war room. The door was cracked open, lamplight spilling into the hallway. Voices drifted out, low, casual, the kind of conversation men had when they thought no one was listening. She should have kept walking, but she heard Kael's voice, and she stopped, her hand lifted toward the door halfway to knocking. She'd been trying to find a reason to speak with him for weeks. Maybe this was it. Maybe she could join the conversation, offer some insight, prove that she could be useful. Then she heard what they were saying. Supply chains holding, but barely, one of the lieutenants was saying. His voice was rough, weathered. She recognized it. Darren, Kael's second in command. If the Virak coalition pushes east again, we'll need to reinforce the border. They won't. Kael's voice was calm, certain. The marriage ended that threat. Lena's chest tightened. Her hand froze in midair. Still, Darren continued, people are starting to talk. You barely see her. Some are wondering if the alliance is as solid as we claimed. There was a pause. Then Kael sighed, a tired sound, almost irritated. Let them talk. She's a signature on a treaty. That's all she needed to be. Lena's breath stopped. You don't even visit her chambers, another voice said. Younger, amused, not once in 3 months. Why would I? Kael's tone didn't change, didn't sharpen. It stayed flat, matter of fact, like he was discussing supply routes. She served her purpose at the altar. I don't need to pretend otherwise. Someone laughed, not cruelly, just casually, like it was a joke they all understood. A third voice spoke up, older, more cautious. A little cold, even for you, Kael. It's practical, Kael said. She's not here to be my companion. She's here because her family needed the alliance and I needed the war to end. That's the arrangement. She understands that. Silence. Then Darren again, quieter now. Does she? She's smart enough, Kael replied. She'll figure it out. Lena's hand dropped to her side. She didn't knock. She didn't cry. She didn't make a sound. She just turned, slowly, and walked back down the corridor. Her footsteps didn't echo. Her breathing stayed even. She felt strangely calm, like she was watching herself from a distance. She walked back to her chambers, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at her hands. A signature on a treaty. That's all she needed to be. For 2 days, Lena didn't leave her chambers. She told Maris she wasn't feeling well. The older woman had frowned, concerned, and brought tea and broth and asked if she should send for a healer. No, Lena said quietly. I just need rest. Maris had nodded and left. No one else came. Lena sat by the window and looked out at the mountains. They stretched endlessly in every direction, gray and jagged and unforgiving, beautiful in a harsh, distant way. She thought about the life she'd imagined when she agreed to this marriage. She'd known it wouldn't be a love match. She wasn't naive, but she'd thought there would be respect, partnership, a shared purpose at least. She'd thought she could build something here, prove her value, earn a place. She'd thought wrong. The bond sat in her chest like a stone, faint, cold, unanswered. She focused on it, trying to feel anything from the other side. Warmth, curiosity, annoyance. Anything, nothing. He didn't think about her, didn't wonder where she was or how she felt. She was furniture, decoration, a problem already solved. And she'd spent 3 months trying to make him see her. 3 months of patience, of hope, of convincing herself that time would change things. It wouldn't. She could stay here for 3 years, 30 years. It wouldn't matter. Kael had gotten what he needed from her the moment she spoke her vows. Everything else was irrelevant. What? On the 3rd day, Lena made her decision. It came quietly, without fanfare. She woke before dawn, the room still dark, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. And she realized she wasn't angry. Anger would have been easier. Anger would have given her something to push against, something to fight. Instead, she just felt clear. She'd been trying to build a bridge to a man who had no intention of meeting her halfway. And she was done. Not heartbroken. Not vengeful. Just done. She got up, washed her face in the basin, and started planning. Leaving wouldn't be easy. Black Hollow was isolated, surrounded by mountains and hostile terrain. She had no money beyond the small allowance the steward provided, and that would be cut off the moment she disappeared. She had no allies here, no one who would help her. But she didn't need help. She needed a plan. She spent the day quietly gathering information. She asked Joran about the supply routes, where the caravans went, how often they traveled. She mentioned to Elva that she'd always wanted to see the Eastern Territories, casually, like it was a passing thought. Elva had shrugged. Rough country out there. Ironcrest holds most of it. They're not fond of outsiders. Why? They've got their own way of doing things. Don't trust the other territories much. Can't blame them, with all the border fighting. Lena nodded, filing the information away. That night, she went through her belongings carefully. She picked out the plainest clothes she had. A wool tunic, leather trousers, a sturdy cloak. She discarded anything with the Viric crest, anything expensive or recognizable. She kept a small knife she'd brought from home, practical and sharp. It had been a gift from her mother. For cutting thread, she'd said. But Lena knew better. She packed nothing else. No jewelry, no letters, no mementos. She didn't want anything that could tie her to who she'd been. She left in the middle of the night. The fortress was quietest between midnight and dawn, when the guards changed shifts and the halls emptied. Lena had timed it carefully, watching the routines over the past few nights. She dressed in the dark, braided her hair tight against her skull, and wrapped herself in the plain cloak. She looked like a servant, unremarkable, forgettable, good. She slipped out of her chambers and moved through the corridors like a shadow. She knew the layout by now, every turn, every staircase. She avoided the main halls, stuck to the servants' passages. No one stopped her. No one even looked. She reached the outer courtyard just as the guards were rotating. A brief gap. 30 seconds, maybe less. She crossed quickly, keeping to the shadows, and slipped through a small gate used for deliveries. And then she was outside. The night air hit her like a slap. Cold, sharp, clean. She pulled the cloak tighter and started walking. The forest bordered the fortress on 3 sides, dense and dark. She headed east, toward the mountains, keeping the stars as her guide. Behind her, Black Hollow rose against the sky, silent and indifferent. She didn't look back. The wilderness between Black Hollow and the Eastern Territories was unforgiving. Steep ridges cut through the landscape like scars. Rivers ran fast and freezing, fed by snowmelt from the peaks. The trees grew thick and tangled, their branches clawing at the sky. It wasn't land meant for travel. It was land meant to keep people out. Lena walked anyway. The first night, she made it maybe 5 miles before exhaustion forced her to stop. She found shelter beneath a fallen tree, curled up against the trunk, and tried to sleep. The cold seeped into her bones. Her cloak wasn't thick enough. Her boots weren't waterproof. She shivered through the dark hours, drifting in and out of restless sleep, and woke with frost on her hair. She got up and kept walking. The second day was worse. Her legs burned. Her lungs ached. The terrain was brutal, loose rocks that shifted under her feet, narrow paths that dropped into nothing. She climbed over fallen logs, waded through icy streams that left her feet numb. She slipped once, badly, and scraped her palms raw, catching herself. Blood welled up, bright against her skin. She wrapped her hands in strips torn from her tunic and kept moving. At night, she huddled in the shelter of rocks or beneath overhangs, shaking so hard her teeth rattled. She ate berries she recognized from her childhood, drank from streams, and rationed her strength, 1 foot in front of the other, 1 breath at a time. The bond twisted in her chest sometimes, pulling faintly back toward the fortress. She felt it like a tug on a string, insistent and uncomfortable. She ignored it. It wasn't a leash, it was just a feeling, and feelings could be endured. On the 4th day, the mountains opened up. Lena crested a ridge and saw the land flatten into rolling hills. Smoke rose in the distance, thin gray columns against the sky. A settlement. Her chest tightened with something that might have been hope. She adjusted her cloak, checked that the knife was still secure in her boot, and started down the slope. The settlement appeared gradually. First just a few scattered buildings, then more, clustered around a central square. It was small, functional, nothing like the grand fortresses of the Western Territories. But it was populated. People moved through the streets, merchants hawked goods, guards in unfamiliar colors patrolled the square. Lena stopped at the edge of town and watched. No one looked at her twice. She was just another traveler, dirty, tired, unremarkable, perfect. She found an inn, a squat wooden building with a weathered sign. Inside, the common room was warm and loud, filled with voices and the smell of food. The innkeeper was a broad woman with sharp eyes. She looked Lena up and down. Need a room? Yes. 2 coppers a night, 3 if you want a meal. Lena reached into the lining of her cloak, where she'd sewn a few coins before leaving. She pulled out 3 coppers and set them on the counter. The woman nodded. Upstairs, 3rd door on the left. Lena climbed the narrow stairs, found the room, and stepped inside. It was tiny. A bed, a basin, a single window that overlooked the street. She closed the door, locked it, and collapsed onto the mattress. Her body ached everywhere. Her feet were blistered, her hands were raw. Her muscles screamed. But she was still breathing, still moving, still free. She closed her eyes and let herself rest. For the first time in months, the silence didn't press down on her. It felt like space. Back in Black Hollow, Kyle didn't notice she was gone until the 5th day. He'd been busy. Territorial disputes, supply issues, a skirmish on the western border that needed his attention. He hadn't thought about Lena in days. He passed her chambers by chance on his way to meet with the steward and saw the door standing open. That was unusual. She usually kept it closed. He frowned and stepped inside. The room was empty. The bed made. The wardrobe open, half the clothes missing. He stood there for a moment confused. Then he turned and found Maris in the hallway. "Where's my wife?" Maris blinked. I don't know, my lord. She said she wasn't feeling well a few days ago. I haven't seen her since. Cale's frown deepened. A few days? 4, I think. 4 days. She'd been gone for 4 days and no one had noticed, including him. He walked to the steward's office. Have you seen Lena? The steward looked up, startled. Not recently, Alpha. Is something wrong? Find her. They searched the fortress, her chambers, the library, the gardens, the great hall. She wasn't there. Her clothes were gone. Some of her belongings missing. One of the guards finally reported seeing a figure in a cloak slip through the delivery gate 4 nights earlier. He'd assumed it was a servant. Kyle stood in the war room, staring at the map spread across the table. She left, Darren said quietly. Kyle didn't respond. Should we send a search party? Kyle pressed a hand to his chest, where the bond sat like a cold weight. He focused on it, tried to feel her direction. East. She'd gone east, into the mountains. Alone. Alpha? Kyle looked up. No, she'll come back. Darren frowned. And if she doesn't? Kale turned away. Then she doesn't. But even as he said it, something twisted in his chest. The bond wouldn't leave him alone. At first it was just a faint discomfort, a pull at the edge of his awareness, easy to ignore. Kale pushed it aside and focused on his work. But over the next 2 days, it grew. Not painful, not sharp, just present. A constant, nagging awareness that tugged at him like a hand on his shoulder. She was still out there, still moving, still alive, still walking away. He tried to ignore it. He couldn't. On the 7th day, he woke in the middle of the night, his chest tight, his breathing uneven. The bond was pulling hard now, insistent and uncomfortable. He sat up, pressing a hand over his sternum. She was far, too far, and she wasn't coming back. He closed his eyes and tried to push the feeling away. It didn't work. For the first time in 3 months, Kyle wondered if he'd made a mistake. Lena woke before dawn on her 2nd day in the settlement. She washed her face in the basin, rebraided her hair, and stepped out into the cold morning air. The town was waking up. Smoke rose from chimneys. Voices drifted from the market square. People moved through their routines, purposeful, unrushed. She walked through the streets slowly, watching, listening. This wasn't Black Hollow. People here looked at each other, spoke, laughed. There was life here, not just function. It wasn't home, but it wasn't a grave either. She bought a piece of bread from a vendor, paid with her last copper, and ate it standing in the square. And she made another decision. She wasn't going back. Not now. Not ever. She'd find work. She'd survive. And she'd build something here. Something that was hers. The settlement had a name, Border Watch. Lena learned it from the baker who sold her bread that first morning, a wiry man with flour dusted across his apron and suspicion in his eyes. You're not from around here, he said. It wasn't a question. No. Where then? Lena hesitated. South, he grunted, unimpressed. Long way to travel alone. I manage. He'd handed her the bread without another word, but she felt his gaze follow her as she walked away. In a place this small, strangers were noticed. Remembered, she'd have to be careful. The town straddled the border between Black Hollow's western reaches and Ironcrest territory, a no-man's land that survived by staying neutral and keeping its head down. The buildings were functional, built from timber and stone hauled from the nearby hills. No walls, no fortress. Just a cluster of structures around a muddy square and a single road that ran east toward the deeper territories. Lena spent the morning exploring, keeping her head down and her eyes open. She counted 3 taverns, a blacksmith, a general store, and a trading post that looked like it doubled as a courier station. Guards patrolled in pairs, mercenaries by the look of them, wearing mismatched armor and carrying weapons that had seen use. No one bothered her. No one asked questions. She was invisible here, and that suited her fine. By midday, her stomach was growling. The bread was long gone, and she had no money left. She needed work. The blacksmith didn't need help. The general store already had staff. The trading post manager took one look at her and shook his head. Can't pay what I don't have, he said. Try the taverns. She did. The first 2 turned her away without a word. The third, a low-ceilinged place called the Crooked Antler, had a woman behind the bar who looked her over with sharp, calculating eyes. You know how to pour drinks? I can learn. Can you handle drunks? I've handled worse. The woman snorted. I doubt that. But fine, you work tonight. If you don't break anything or start a fight, you get paid. 2 coppers and whatever tips you earn. It wasn't much, but it was something. Deal, Lena said. The woman nodded. Name's Mara. Don't make me regret this. Lena worked that night and every night after. The Crooked Antler was loud, smoky, and full of people who didn't ask questions. Traders, travelers, mercenaries passing through. Lena poured drinks, cleared tables, and kept her mouth shut. She learned quickly how to move through a crowded room without drawing attention, how to deflect unwanted conversation, how to spot trouble before it started. Mara watched her like a hawk for the first 3 days, then seemed to relax. You're faster than you look, she said one night, counting coins at the bar. And you don't steal. That's rare. Lena shrugged. I don't need trouble. Smart. Mara slid 2 coppers across the counter. Same time tomorrow. Lena pocketed the coins and left. She rented a room above a seamstress's shop, barely more than a closet with a bedroll and a cracked window, but it was hers. She paid a week in advance and locked the door behind her. The bond was still there, faint and distant, pulling west like a thread she couldn't cut. She felt it most at night when the noise of the tavern faded and the silence pressed in. A tug. A reminder. She ignored it. Kyle was part of a life she'd left behind. Whatever he felt or didn't feel didn't matter anymore. She was surviving. And that was enough. For now. 3 weeks passed. Lena fell into a rhythm. Work, sleep, repeat. She kept her head down, saved every copper she could, and spoke to no one unless she had to. The tavern regulars started to recognize her, nodding when she refilled their drinks, but no one pried. It was exactly what she needed. Until the night the Ironcrest soldiers walked in. She noticed them immediately. They moved differently than the mercenaries, disciplined, organized, their armor clean and well-maintained. There were 4 of them, led by a man with a scarred jaw and cold eyes. They took a table near the back. Mara stiffened behind the bar. Trouble? Lena asked quietly. Maybe. Ironcrest doesn't send patrols this far west unless they're looking for something. Lena's chest tightened. Like what? Who knows? Just stay out of their way. Lena nodded and kept working. She poured drinks for the other tables, cleared plates, avoided looking at the soldiers directly. But she felt their eyes on her. When she brought their drinks, ale for 3, water for the leader, the scarred man looked up at her. You're new, he said. I work here. That's not what I asked. Lena set the mugs down carefully. I've been here a few weeks. Where from? South. His eyes narrowed. South is a big place. It is. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. You running from something? Lena met his gaze steady. No. Funny. You look like someone who's running. One of the other soldiers chuckled. Lena didn't react. If you need anything else, let me know, she said, and turned to leave. Wait. She stopped. The scarred man pulled a folded piece of parchment from his coat and laid it on the table. You recognize this woman? Lena glanced down. It was a sketch. Rough, but clear enough. Dark hair, sharp features, a face she'd seen in the mirror every day for 23 years. Her face. Her pulse spiked, but she kept her expression neutral. No? You sure? Look closer. She did, pretending to study it. I don't know her. Sorry. The man watched her for a long moment, then folded the parchment and tucked it away. If you see her, you let us know. There's a reward. What'd she do? That's not your concern. Lena nodded and walked away, her heart hammering in her chest. She finished her shift on autopilot, her mind racing. Someone was looking for her. Ironcrest, specifically. That meant Kyle had reached out to them, or they'd found out on their own. Either way, she couldn't stay here. When the tavern closed, Mara pulled her aside. Those soldiers were asking about you. Lena's stomach dropped. What did you tell them? Nothing. I don't talk to Ironcrest unless I have to. Mara crossed her arms. But they'll be back, and next time they'll ask more questions. I'll leave. Where will you go? Lena didn't have an answer. Mara sighed. Look, I don't know what you're running from, and I don't care, but if you're smart, you'll head east. Deeper into Ironcrest. They won't expect that. Why would I go toward them? Because they're looking for someone running away, not someone walking in. Mara pulled a small leather pouch from her apron and pressed it into Lena's hand. 3 weeks' pay. Take it and go. Lena stared at the pouch. You don't have to... I know, but you're a good worker, and I hate waste. Now get out of here before I change my mind. Lena left that night. She packed what little she had, a change of clothes, the knife, the pouch of coins, and slipped out of Border Watch before dawn. The road east was narrow and rough, winding through foothills that rose into sharper peaks. She walked for 2 days, stopping only to rest and refill her waterskin from streams. The land grew wilder, the settlements farther apart. She passed traders on the road, their wagons loaded with furs and grain, and they barely glanced at her. Good. On the 3rd day, she reached a fork in the road. One path led northeast toward a cluster of villages marked on a weathered signpost. The other led southeast, deeper into the mountains. Lena hesitated. The villages would have people, resources, but also guards, questions. The mountains would be harder, riskier, but harder meant fewer people, and fewer people meant fewer chances of being found. She took the mountain path. The terrain turned brutal almost immediately. Steep climbs, loose rock, narrow trails that hugged cliff edges and dropped into nothing. She slipped twice, caught herself both times, and kept moving. At night, the temperature plummeted. She huddled beneath overhangs or in the shelter of boulders, wrapped in her cloak, shivering so hard her ribs ached. The bond pulled at her constantly now, insistent and uncomfortable. It wasn't pain, but it was close, a persistent ache that sat in her chest and wouldn't fade. She gritted her teeth and pushed forward. On the 5th day, she crested a ridge and saw smoke, a lot of smoke. She approached cautiously, staying low, and peered over the edge. Below, nestled in a valley between 2 peaks, was a fortress. Not like Black Hollow. This one was larger, more angular, built from dark stone that seemed to drink in the light. Walls surrounded it, thick and high, with watchtowers at each corner. Banners flew from the parapets, deep blue with a silver wolf. Ironcrest. Lena's breath caught. She'd heard stories about Ironcrest. It was the largest territory in the Eastern Reach, governed by an alpha named Rylan Cade. Ruthless, some said. Brilliant, others claimed. He'd consolidated power over a dozen smaller territories in less than 5 years, not through conquest, but through strategy. And she'd just walked straight to his doorstep. She should turn around, find another path, avoid this place entirely. But as she stared down at the fortress, something shifted in her chest. She was tired of running, tired of hiding. If Ironcrest was looking for her, they'd find her eventually. And when they did, she'd be weak, desperate, easy to dismiss. But if she walked in on her own terms? That was different. Lena stood, brushed the dirt from her clothes, and started down the slope. The guards at the gate stopped her before she got within 20 feet. State your business, one of them said. He was young, maybe 20, with a spear held across his chest. I need to speak with someone in charge. About what? That's between me and them. The guard frowned. We don't just let anyone in. I'm not asking to stay. I'm asking for 5 minutes. The second guard, older and scarred, looked her over. You got a name? Lena hesitated. Then, Lena Vierek. The younger guard's eyes widened. The older one's expression didn't change, but his grip on his weapon tightened. Wait here, he said, and disappeared through the gate. Lena stood in the cold, her heart pounding, and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Finally, the gate opened, and the older guard reappeared. Come with me. She followed him through the courtyard, past training yards where soldiers drilled in tight formations, past stables and armories and barracks. The fortress was alive, busy, purposeful, nothing like the cold silence of Black Hollow. They stopped at a set of heavy wooden doors. The guard knocked twice, waited, then pushed them open. Inside was an office. Maps covered the walls. A desk sat in the center, piled with papers and reports. And behind the desk stood a man. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair streaked with gray and sharp, intelligent eyes. He looked up as she entered, and his gaze pinned her in place. "Lena Virek," he said. His voice was deep, measured. "You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Lena said. He almost smiled. "I'm Rylan Cade, and you're going to tell me why the runaway wife of Cale Thorne just walked into my fortress." Lena met his gaze steady. "Because I'm done running." Rylan studied her for a long moment. Then he gestured to a chair. "Sit. We're going to talk." She sat, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like someone was actually listening. Rylan didn't waste time. "Cale's been looking for you," he said, leaning against the desk. "Sent word to every territory within 100 miles. Offered a reward for information. I know. And yet you came here. I figured you'd find me eventually. This way I control the conversation." Rylan's expression shifted, something that might have been respect. "Smart, risky, but smart." He crossed his arms. "So what do you want? Asylum? Why would I grant that? You're Kael's wife. Legally, you belong to Black Hollow." "I don't belong to anyone." "The treaty says otherwise." Lena leaned forward. "The treaty said I had to marry him. It didn't say I had to stay." Rylan raised an eyebrow. "Semantics." "Law." He laughed, a short, sharp sound. "You've got nerve. I'll give you that." He pushed off the desk and walked to the window, looking out over the valley. "But nerve doesn't change politics. If I take you in, Kael will see it as an act of aggression. We're not at war with Black Hollow, and I'd like to keep it that way." "Then don't take me in. Just don't send me back." "And where will you go?" "I don't know yet." Rylan turned, his gaze sharp. "You walked across a mountain range in winter with no supplies and no plan. You're either desperate or insane." "Maybe both." He studied her for a long moment, then, "Why did you leave?" Lena's jaw tightened. "That's not your business." "It is if you want my help." She met his eyes, weighing her options. Then, quietly, "He didn't want me. I was a signature on a treaty, that's all." Rylan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his gaze. "And you decided that wasn't enough?" "No. I decided I wasn't going to spend my life being invisible." Silence. Then Rylan nodded slowly. "All right, here's what I'll do. You can stay, temporarily. You'll work, earn your keep, prove you're not a liability. If you can do that, we'll talk about what comes next. And if Kael demands I be returned, I'll deal with Kael." Lena hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" Rylan smiled, thin and sharp. "Because I don't like being told what to do. And because I'm curious to see what you're capable of." He gestured to the door. "There's a woman named Seren in the West Wing. She'll get you settled. Don't make me regret this." Lena stood. "I won't." As she reached the door, Rylan called after her. "One more thing." She turned. "If you're lying to me, if this is some scheme of Kael's, I'll know, and you won't like what happens next." Lena held his gaze. "I'm not lying." "Good." She left, her heart still pounding, and followed the guard to the West Wing. Seren was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with iron-gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked Lena up and down, unimpressed. "You're the runaway." "I'm Lena." Same thing. Seren handed her a bundle of clothes, plain, practical, warm. "You'll bunk with the staff. You'll work in the archives. Can you read?" "Yes." "Good. You start tomorrow. Don't be late." Lena nodded. Seren turned to leave, then paused. "Word of advice, don't expect special treatment. No one here cares who you were. What matters is what you do." "That's all I want," Lena said. Seren grunted and walked away. Lena found her bunk in a shared room with 3 other women, all staff, all busy. They glanced at her, nodded, and went back to their work. No questions, no judgment, just space. Lena sat on the narrow bed, her body aching, her mind still racing. She'd made it, for now. The work in the archives was tedious but oddly satisfying. Lena spent her days sorting records, updating ledgers, cross-referencing supply reports with delivery schedules. It was detail-oriented, precise, and no one bothered her while she did it. The head archivist, a thin man named Corvin, explained her tasks once and then left her alone. "If you have questions, ask. If you break something, fix it. If you can't fix it, tell me. She didn't break anything. After 3 days, Corvin started giving her more complex tasks, reconciling discrepancies in the grain shipments, identifying inefficiencies in the trade routes. She found problems, small ones at first, a delivery that had been recorded twice, a shipment that had gone to the wrong outpost. She fixed them. On the 5th day, she noticed something bigger. One of the northern supply lines was losing nearly 15% of its shipments to spoilage. But the numbers didn't add up. The routes were short, the weather stable. There was no reason for that much loss. She flagged it and brought it to Corvin. He frowned. You sure? Look at the pattern. It's consistent. Every month, same percentage. Corvin studied the ledger, then nodded slowly. I'll take this to Rylan. An hour later, she was summoned to his office. Rylan was standing at the map wall when she entered, his arms crossed. He didn't look up. You found the discrepancy in the northern line. Yes, Corvin says you think it's theft. I think it's worth investigating. Rylan finally turned, his gaze sharp. Do you know what happens if you're wrong? You waste time on an investigation. And if you're right, you stop losing resources. He studied her for a long moment, then, I'm sending a team north tomorrow. You're going with them. Lena blinked. What? You found the problem. You're going to help solve it. I'm not a soldier. No, but you're smart and you notice things. That's more useful than you think. He gestured to the door. Report to Captain Jace at dawn. Don't be late. She left, her pulse racing. This wasn't what she'd expected. But maybe, just maybe, it was what she needed. The next morning, Lena met Captain Jace in the courtyard. He was a stocky man with a grizzled beard and eyes that missed nothing. He looked her over, unimpressed. You're the archivist. Yes. You know how to ride? Well enough. He grunted and handed her reins. Keep up. Don't slow us down. And if there's trouble, stay out of the way. They rode north with a team of 6 soldiers. The journey took 2 days, cutting through dense forest and rocky terrain. Lena kept pace, her body protesting every mile, but she didn't complain. When they reached the northern outpost, Jace went straight to the supply master, a wiry man named Terran who looked nervous the moment he saw them. Captain, Terran said, his smile too wide, this is unexpected. Random inspection, Jace said. Show me your records. Terran's smile faltered. Of course. Right this way. Lena followed them into the storage building. Jace started comparing the physical inventory to the ledger entries, his expression darkening with every discrepancy. You're short, he said finally, by a lot. Spoilage, Terran said quickly. The weather's been fine, Lena cut in. She stepped forward, holding up the ledger. And your spoilage rate doesn't match the pattern. It's too consistent, too deliberate. Terran's face went pale. I don't know what you're... Where's the grain going? Jace demanded. Terran's mouth opened, closed. He looked at Lena, then at Jace, then at the soldiers flanking the door. And he ran. He didn't make it 10 feet before one of the soldiers tackled him. Jace sighed. Search the building. They found the stolen supplies an hour later, hidden in a false wall, ready to be sold on the black market. Jace arrested Terran and 2 of his accomplices. As they loaded the recovered grain onto wagons, he turned to Lena. You were right. She nodded, still processing. Rylan's going to want to hear about this. When they returned to Ironcrest, Rylan was waiting. He listened to Jace's report in silence, his expression unreadable. When the captain finished, Rylan looked at Lena. Good work. Thank you. You just saved this territory a significant amount of resources. That doesn't go unnoticed. He leaned back in his chair. How do you feel about staying? Lena's chest tightened. Permanently? For now, prove yourself useful and we'll see where it goes. She met his gaze, steady. I can do that. I know. As she turned to leave, Rylan called after her. Lena. She stopped. You're not just surviving anymore. You're building. Don't forget that. So she nodded, a strange warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in months, she felt like she mattered. And she wasn't going to let that go. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling beams, replaying Rylan's words. You're not just surviving anymore. You're building. The phrase circled in her mind, foreign and almost uncomfortable. She'd spent so long in survival mode that the idea of building something, of mattering, felt dangerous, like hope she couldn't afford. But it was there anyway, lodged in her chest like a splinter. Around her, the other women slept soundly. One of them, Kira, a supply clerk, snored softly. Another, Meta, muttered something unintelligible and rolled over. Lena envied their ease, the way they seemed to belong here without question. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep. The bond pulled at her, faint but insistent. It had been doing that more often lately, not painful, but present. A reminder that somewhere, miles away, Kyle was still on the other end of that invisible thread. She wondered if he felt it too. Then she stopped wondering and forced herself to think about something else. By the time dawn broke, she'd gotten maybe 2 hours of rest. She dressed quickly, splashed cold water on her face, and headed to the archives. Corvin was already there, bent over a stack of ledgers with a cup of something that smelled like burnt herbs. "You're early," he said without looking up. "Couldn't sleep." "Good. I need you to cross-reference these trade agreements with the shipment records from the past 6 months. Someone's been approving deals that don't match our actual capacity." Lena took the stack and settled at her desk. The work was meticulous, requiring focus, and she welcomed the distraction. She spent the morning combing through contracts, flagging inconsistencies, making notes in the margins. By midday, she'd found 3 separate deals that had been approved despite the territory lacking the resources to fulfill them. It wasn't theft this time. It was incompetence. Or worse, desperation. She brought the findings to Corvin, who swore under his breath. "This is going to make us look weak," he muttered, "or it's going to show that someone's not doing their job." Corvin shot her a look. "You don't pull punches, do you?" "Should I?" He almost smiled. "No, but be careful. Not everyone here appreciates honesty." Noted. He took the reports and disappeared into Ryland's office. Lena went back to work, ignoring the uneasy twist in her stomach. An hour later, Ryland summoned her. When she entered, he wasn't alone. A man stood beside his desk, tall, lean, with silver hair and a sharp, angular face. He looked at her like she was something he'd scraped off his boot. "This is Counselor Varen," Ryland said. "He oversees trade negotiations." Varen's lips thinned. "And you're the woman who's been digging through my contracts." Lena met his gaze, steady. "I was asked to verify the records." "By whom?" "By me," Ryland said. His tone was calm, but there was an edge to it. "And she found discrepancies. Care to explain?" Varen's jaw tightened. "Trade is complicated. Sometimes deals are approved based on projected resources, not current inventory. It's standard practice." "Standard practice that leaves us overcommitted and vulnerable," Lena said. Varen's eyes snapped to her. "You've been here, 2 weeks? And you think you understand how this territory runs? I understand numbers, and these don't add up." "She's right," Ryland said. "We're promising grain we don't have and iron we can't produce. If those partners call in their agreements, we'll default. That damages our reputation and our leverage." Varen's face flushed. "I was working on solutions. Then work faster, and stop approving deals without verifying capacity first." Ryland's voice was firm, final. "Lena will be auditing all future trade agreements before they're signed." Varen's expression darkened. "You're giving an outsider authority over our negotiations?" "I'm giving someone competent the job you should have been doing." Ryland turned to Lena. "You'll report directly to me. Any deal that doesn't pass your review doesn't move forward." Lena's pulse quickened. "Understood." Varen stared at her for a long moment, his eyes cold. Then he turned and left without another word. When the door closed, Ryland sighed. "You just made an enemy," he said. "I noticed." "Varen's been here for 15 years. He has allies, influence. He's not going to let this go." Lena straightened. "Should I have lied?" "No, but you should watch your back." She nodded, though unease prickled at the base of her skull. Ryland studied her for a moment, then handed her a folder. "These are pending deals. Review them by tomorrow." "And Lena?" "Yes?" "Don't let Varen intimidate you. You're here because you're useful. Keep being useful, and I'll keep you safe." She took the folder and left, her mind already racing. Over the next 2 weeks, Lena buried herself in work. She reviewed trade agreements, flagged bad deals, renegotiated terms where she could. She worked late into the night, cross-referencing records, running projections, making sure every contract was airtight. It was exhausting, but it was also satisfying in a way she hadn't expected. For the first time in her life, her work mattered. People listened. Decisions changed because of her input. Not everyone was happy about it. Varen's allies, older counselors and advisors who'd been entrenched in their positions for years, started pushing back. They questioned her findings, challenged her authority, spread rumors that she was a Black Hollow spy sent to sabotage Ironcrest from within. Lena ignored them, but the tension grew. One evening, she was walking back to her quarters when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and found Varen blocking the corridor. "Counselor," she said evenly. "You're making a mistake," he said. His voice was low, controlled. "You think Rylan will protect you, but he won't. Not when it becomes inconvenient." "Is that a threat?" "It's advice. You're an outsider, you don't belong here, and the moment you stop being useful, you'll be discarded." Lena stepped closer, her voice cold. "Then I'll make sure I stay useful." Varen's eyes narrowed. "We'll see." He walked past her, his shoulder brushing hers hard enough to make her stumble. Lena steadied herself and kept walking. That night, she barely slept again. The next morning, everything changed. Lena was in the archives when Captain Jace appeared in the doorway, his expression grim. "Rylan wants you, now." She followed him to the war room, where Rylan stood surrounded by maps and reports. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "The eastern outpost was attacked last night." Lena's stomach dropped. "Attacked by who?" "Unknown. They hit fast, burned the supply depot, and disappeared before our patrols could respond." "How bad?" 3 dead. A month's worth of grain destroyed." Rylan's hands curled into fists. "And they left a message." He gestured to the table. Lena stepped forward and saw it. A piece of cloth nailed to a wooden board, the words written in ash. "Return what you stole." "What does that mean?" she asked. Rylan looked at her, his gaze hard. "It means someone thinks we took something from them, and they want it back." "What did we take?" "Nothing, which means either they're lying or someone's been operating without my knowledge." Varen's face flashed in Lena's mind. She opened her mouth, then hesitated. Rylan caught it. "What?" "The trade deals I flagged. Some of them were with fringe groups, mercenaries, bandits. If someone promised them resources and didn't deliver," Rylan's expression darkened, "they'd see it as theft and retaliate." He swore under his breath. "Get me everything you have on those deals, names, locations, amounts." Lena nodded and ran back to the archives. She pulled every flagged contract, every note she'd made, and brought them to Rylan. He spread them across the table, his eyes scanning quickly. "Here," he said, tapping one. "The Red Ridge clan. We promised them iron in exchange for safe passage through their territory. The deal was approved 3 months ago." "Did we deliver?" "No, because we didn't have the iron." Lena's chest tightened. "Then they think we cheated them. And now they're hitting back." Rylan looked up, his gaze sharp. "We need to fix this before it escalates." "How?" "We negotiate, offer compensation, make it right." He paused. "And I need you to come with me." Lena blinked. "What?" "You found the problem. You understand the details. You're the best person to explain what went wrong. They're not going to listen to me. You're smart, and you're not one of the people who screwed them over." Rylan's voice was firm. "I need someone I can trust. That's you." Lena's pulse raced. This was dangerous, stupid even, but Rylan was looking at her like she mattered, like she could do this. "All right," she said. "I'll go." They left at dawn. Rylan brought a small group, Captain Jace, 4 soldiers, and Lena. They rode east, into the foothills where the Red Ridge clan operated. The landscape was harsh, rocky, barren, dotted with scrub brush and skeletal trees. The wind cut through Lena's cloak, sharp and cold. They reached the clan's camp by midday. It wasn't much, a cluster of tents and makeshift shelters scattered across a ridge. But the people were armed, watchful, and they didn't look happy to see visitors. A woman stepped forward. She was older, her face lined and hard. Her hair streaked with gray. A scar ran from her temple to her jaw. "Ryland Cade," she said. Her voice was rough, like gravel. "You've got nerve showing up here." "I came to talk, Marin. Talk won't bring back my people." "I know, and I'm sorry, but I didn't authorize the attack." Marin's eyes narrowed. "You expect me to believe that?" "I expect you to listen." Ryland dismounted, hands open, non-threatening. "We made a deal. I know we didn't deliver. That was a mistake. A mistake that cost us. I know, and I'm here to make it right." Marin looked past him, her gaze landing on Lena. "Who's she?" "Someone who figured out what went wrong," Ryland said. "She's here to explain." Lena dismounted, her legs unsteady. Marin's stare was sharp, assessing. "Well?" Marin said. Lena swallowed. "The deal was approved by someone who didn't verify our resources. We didn't have the iron to deliver. It wasn't intentional. It was incompetence." Marin snorted. "That's supposed to make me feel better?" "No, but it's the truth, and we're here to compensate you." "With what? More promises?" Ryland stepped forward. "With grain, weapons, and safe passage rights through Ironcrest territory. No tariffs, no fees. For a year." Marin's expression didn't change. "Not enough." "Then tell me what is." Silence. Marin looked at Lena again. "You're the one who found this?" "Yes." "Why should I believe you're not just covering for him?" Lena met her gaze, steady. "Because I don't work for Ryland. I work for Ironcrest, and I don't lie about the numbers." Marin studied her for a long moment. Then she turned back to Ryland. "You've got 3 days. Deliver what you promised, plus half again in silver. If you don't, we hit another outpost. And next time we won't stop at grain." Ryland nodded. "You have my word." "Your word means nothing, but hers might." Marin pointed at Lena. "She comes back when you deliver, alone. If she doesn't show, the deal's off." Lena's stomach dropped. Ryland hesitated. "That's non-negotiable." He looked at Lena. She nodded, though her heart was pounding. "Fine," Ryland said. "She'll be here." Marin smiled, thin and sharp. "Good. Now get out." They rode back in silence. When they reached Ironcrest, Ryland pulled her aside. "You didn't have to agree to that." "Yes, I did. It's dangerous." "I know." Lena met his gaze. "But if I don't go, this doesn't end, and more people die." Ryland studied her for a long moment. "You're braver than I thought. Or stupider." He almost smiled. "Maybe both." 3 days later, Lena rode back to the Red Ridge camp alone. She carried the silver in saddlebags, along with a signed agreement guaranteeing passage rights. Her hands shook as she approached the camp, but she kept her face calm. Marin was waiting. "You came." "I said I would." Marin took the silver, checked the agreement, and nodded. "This settles it. For now." "Good." Marin tilted her head, studying her. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone weaker, someone who'd run." Marin's eyes were sharp. "But you didn't. Why?" Lena hesitated, then, "Because I'm tired of running." Marin nodded slowly. "Smart girl. Get out of here before I change my mind." Lena rode back to Ironcrest, her heart still racing, but something had shifted. She'd faced danger, made a choice, survived, and for the first time she felt like she'd earned her place. When she returned, Ryland was waiting at the gate. "How did it go?" "It's done." He exhaled, relief crossing his face. "Good. You did well." "Thanks." He paused, then said quietly, "You're not an outsider anymore, Lena. You've proven yourself. Whatever happens next, you have a place here." Lena nodded, warmth spreading through her chest. But that warmth shattered an hour later. She was crossing the courtyard when she heard voices, angry, loud. She followed the sound and found a crowd gathered near the main gate. At the center stood Varen, and beside him, flanked by guards in black hollow colors, was Kael. Lena's breath stopped. Kael's eyes found hers across the crowd, and for a moment everything else disappeared. He looked different, tired, drawn. The bond flared between them, sharp and undeniable. "There she is," Varen said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "The runaway bride. Kael stepped forward. Lena. She didn't move. Rylan appeared at her side, his expression hard. What are you doing here, Thorne? I came for my wife. She's not your property. She's bound to me by treaty, and I want her back. The crowd murmured. Lena's pulse hammered in her ears. Rylan looked at her. What do you want? Lena met Kael's gaze, and for the first time in months, she didn't look away. I'm not going back. Kael's jaw tightened. Lena, you had months. You chose indifference. Her voice was steady, cold. I chose myself. The bond twisted, sharp and painful. Kael took a step closer. I made a mistake. You made a choice. Let me fix it. No. The word hung in the air, final and unbreakable. Kael stared at her, something raw and desperate in his eyes. Then Varen spoke, his voice cutting. This is Ironcrest's doing. They've turned her against you. That's not, Rylan started. But Kael's expression had already hardened. If that's how it is, he said quietly, then we're done. He turned and walked away, his guards following. The crowd dispersed. Lena stood frozen, her chest tight, the bond screaming in protest. Rylan touched her shoulder. You all right? She nodded, though she wasn't sure it was true. Because as Kael disappeared through the gate, she realized something. She'd won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the beginning of something far more dangerous. The bond screamed for 3 days straight. It wasn't pain, not exactly, but it was close. A constant grinding ache that sat in Lena's chest and refused to fade. She felt Kael on the other end of it, distant but furious, the connection pulling taut like a rope about to snap. She ignored it. She had work to do. The morning after Kael left, Rylan called a council meeting. Lena wasn't invited, but she heard about it anyway. Whispers in the corridors, tense voices behind closed doors. Varen was pushing hard, claiming that harboring her would bring war with Black Hollow, that Kael would see it as a declaration of aggression. Rylan apparently told him to shut up. But the damage was done. The fortress was buzzing with tension, and Lena could feel eyes on her everywhere she went. Some curious, some hostile, all wondering the same thing. Was she worth the risk? She kept her head down and worked. Corvin piled more tasks on her desk, audits, reports, projections. She tackled them methodically, finding inefficiencies, flagging errors, making herself indispensable. If people were going to question her value, she'd make damn sure the numbers spoke louder than the rumors. On the third day, the bond finally quieted. Not gone, just muted, like Kael had stopped pulling and started accepting. Lena exhaled and went back to work. That afternoon, Rylan summoned her. When she entered his office, he was standing at the window, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't turn around. Kael sent a letter, he said. Lena's pulse quickened. What does it say? That he's withdrawing his claim, publicly. He'll inform the other territories that the marriage alliance is void and that you're no longer under Black Hollow's protection. She blinked. That's good, right? It's complicated. Rylan finally turned. It means you're free, but it also means you're unprotected. If anyone has a grudge against the Viric family or wants leverage against Ironcrest, you're an easy target. Lena's jaw tightened. I can handle myself. I know you can, but you shouldn't have to. He crossed his arms. I'm offering you formal asylum, a place here, not as Kael's wife, as yourself. What does that mean? It means you stay, you work, you contribute, and in return, Ironcrest protects you as one of our own. Lena stared at him. Why would you do that? Because you're useful, because you've earned it, and because I don't like being told what to do. He almost smiled. But mostly because you've proven you're more than just a political pawn. You're smart, resourceful, and you don't back down. That's rare. She hesitated. What about the council? Varen's been pushing back. Let me worry about Varen. You just keep doing what you're doing. Lena nodded slowly. All right, I'll stay. Good. Rylan gestured to the door. Now get out of here. I have actual work to do. She left, her chest lighter than it had been in weeks. For the first time since she'd arrived, she felt like she had a future. But futures, she was learning, were fragile things. The next morning, everything went sideways. Lena was in the archives when Captain Jace burst through the door, his face grim. "Rylan needs you. Now." She followed him to the war room where Rylan stood surrounded by maps and reports. His expression was dark. "We have a problem," he said without preamble. "The western border's under attack." Lena's stomach dropped. "Black Hollow?" "No, bandits. A large group, well-armed, well-organized. They hit 3 villages in 2 days, burned homes, stole supplies, killed anyone who resisted." "How many?" "At least 50, maybe more." Ryland's hands curled into fists. "And they're moving east, toward us." "What do they want?" "No idea. But they're not stopping." He looked up, his gaze sharp. "I need you to look at something." He handed her a scrap of fabric, torn, blood-stained, with a crude symbol stitched into the corner, a wolf's head with an arrow through it. Lena frowned. "I don't recognize it." "Neither do I, but someone does." Ryland gestured to a woman standing in the corner, older, gray-haired, with sharp eyes and a weathered face. "This is Marin." Lena's breath caught. "From Red Ridge?" Marin nodded. "I came as soon as I heard. That symbol, it's the Iron Fangs. Mercenaries. Dangerous ones." "Why are they hitting Ironcrest?" Rylan asked. "Because someone paid them to." Marin's voice was hard. "And I'd bet my best blade I know who." "Who?" "Varen." The room went silent. Ryland's expression darkened. "Explain." Marin stepped forward, pulling a folded piece of parchment from her coat. "One of my scouts intercepted this 3 days ago. It's a ledger. Payments from an Ironcrest account to a mercenary contact. The amounts match the Iron Fang's usual rates." Ryland took the ledger, his jaw tightening as he read. "This account belongs to the trade office." "Which Varen controls," Lena said quietly. Ryland looked up, his eyes cold. "He hired them." "To destabilize the territory," Marin said. "Make you look weak. Turn the council against you." "And frame me for it," Lena added. "If people think I'm the reason Ironcrest's under attack, they'll want you gone," Ryland finished. He slammed the ledger onto the table. "Where is Varen?" "He left this morning," Jace said. "Said he had business in the southern outpost." "He's running." Ryland's voice was ice. "Jace, take a team. Bring him back. Alive." Jace nodded and left. Ryland turned to Lena. "I need you to go through every transaction Varen's made in the past 6 months. Find the proof. Make it airtight." "What about the Iron Fangs?" "I'll handle them." He looked at Marin. "You willing to help?" Marin grinned, sharp and feral. "I've been waiting for an excuse to crack some skulls. Let's go." Lena spent the next 12 hours buried in ledgers. She cross-referenced accounts, tracked payments, followed paper trails that twisted and doubled back. Varen had been careful, layering transactions, using intermediaries, hiding his tracks, but not careful enough. By midnight, she had it. A clear pattern of payments from Varen's account to a known mercenary contact. Dates that matched the attacks, amounts that lined up perfectly. She brought the evidence to Ryland just as Jace returned. With Varen. The counselor was bound, his face bruised, his expression venomous. "This is outrageous," he spat. "You have no right." "I have every right." Ryland's voice was cold. "You hired mercenaries to attack my territory. You tried to frame Lena for destabilizing Ironcrest, and you nearly started a war. You can't prove." Lena stepped forward and dropped the ledgers on the table. "Yes, we can." Varen's face went pale. Ryland leaned in, his voice low and dangerous. "You're done. Stripped of your position, your assets seized, and if I find out you've caused any more damage, I'll have you hanged." Varen's mouth worked, but no sound came out. "Get him out of my sight," Ryland said. Jace dragged him away. Lena exhaled, her hands shaking. Ryland looked at her. "You all right?" "I will be." "Good. Because we're not finished yet." The Iron Fangs attacked 2 days later. They came at dawn, hitting the northern gate with siege equipment and fire. Ryland had prepared, reinforced the walls, positioned archers, set traps along the approach. Lena watched from the war room, her heart pounding as the battle unfolded. The mercenaries were brutal, but disorganized. They relied on brute force, expecting the defenses to crumble quickly. They didn't. Ryland's soldiers held the line, picking off attackers with disciplined precision. Marin and her Red Ridge fighters flanked from the east, cutting off the mercenaries' retreat. It was over in 3 hours. The Iron Fangs broke and ran, leaving their dead behind. Lena stood at the window, watching the aftermath. Smoke rose from the battlefield. Soldiers moved through the carnage, helping the wounded, securing prisoners. Ryland appeared beside her, his armor streaked with blood. "We won," he said quietly. "You won." "No, we won." He looked at her. "You found the evidence. You stopped Varen. You saved this territory." Lena shook her head. "I just did the work. That's all anyone can do." Ryland's voice was firm. "And you did it well." That night, Ryland called the council together. Lena stood at the back of the room, watching as he addressed them. "Varen betrayed us," Ryland said. His voice was steady, but there was steel beneath it. "He hired mercenaries to attack our people. He tried to destabilize this territory for his own gain, and he nearly succeeded." The counselors murmured, shifting uncomfortably. "But he didn't succeed because someone stopped him." Ryland gestured to Lena. "Lena Vierek uncovered his crimes. She found the proof, and she did it while half of you were calling her a spy." Silence. "She's proven herself, not just to me, but to all of you, and from now on she has my full backing." He paused. "Anyone who has a problem with that can leave. Now." No one moved. Ryland nodded. "Good. Meeting adjourned." As the counselors filed out, Lena stayed where she was, her chest tight. Ryland approached. "How does it feel? Strange? You'll get used to it." He handed her a small leather folder. "This is yours, official appointment as Chief Auditor of Ironcrest. You report directly to me. You have full authority over all financial and trade matters." Lena stared at the folder. "You're serious?" "Very." "Why?" "Because you earned it. Because I trust you. And because this territory needs people who aren't afraid to tell the truth." He smiled. "Even when it's inconvenient." Lena took the folder, her hands trembling. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This job's going to make you a lot of enemies." "I'm used to that." "Good." Lena left the council chamber and walked through the fortress in a daze. People nodded to her as she passed. Some even smiled. It was small, but it was real. She'd gone from invisible to indispensable, from surviving to building. She found a quiet corner in the archives and sat down, staring at the folder in her hands. For the first time in her life, she had a title that was hers. Not her family's, not her husband's. Hers. The bond was quiet now. Barely a whisper. Kyle had let go. And so had she. But as she sat there, a knock came at the door. Meta appeared, breathless. "Lena, there's someone at the gate, asking for you." Lena's stomach dropped. "Who?" "He says he's from Black Hollow, and he's not leaving until he talks to you." Lena stood, her pulse racing. "Did he give a name?" "Cale Thorne." The world tilted. Lena forced herself to breathe. "Tell him I'm not—" "He said he's not here to take you back. He just wants to talk." Lena hesitated. She could refuse. Stay here. Let Ryland send him away. But part of her, small, stubborn, still tied to that damn bond, wanted to know why he'd come. "Fine," she said. "I'll meet him." Meta's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." Cale was waiting in the courtyard. He stood alone, no guards, no weapons. He looked thinner than she remembered. Tired. The bond stirred faintly, recognizing him. Lena stopped 10 feet away. "What do you want?" "To apologize." She crossed her arms. "You already did that." "Not properly." He took a step forward. "I was wrong about everything. I treated you like a transaction instead of a person. I ignored you, dismissed you. And by the time I realized what I'd lost, you were already gone. And now you want me back. No." His voice was quiet. "I know that's not happening. You made that clear, and you were right to." Lena frowned. "Then why are you here?" "Because I needed you to know that I regret it, that I see it now. What I did. What I threw away." He paused. "You deserved better. And I'm sorry I couldn't give it to you." Silence. Lena studied him, searching for a lie, a trick, some hidden angle. She found none, just exhaustion and regret. "I don't forgive you," she said finally. "I'm not asking you to. And I'm not coming back." "I know." She nodded slowly. "Then we're done." Kael's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "We're done." He turned and walked away. The bond twisted one last time, sharp, painful, and then faded. Not gone, but distant, quiet. Lena stood in the courtyard, watching him disappear through the gate, and for the first time in months she felt nothing. No regret, no anger, no longing, just peace. She turned and walked back into the fortress. Rylan was waiting near the entrance. "You all right?" "Yeah." She took a breath. "I am." "Good." He gestured to the war room. "We've got work to do. The southern outposts need new supply routes, and I want your input." Lena followed him, her steps steady. She wasn't someone's wife anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was Lena Vierick, chief auditor of Ironcrest, and she had work to do. That night, Lena stood at her window, looking out over the valley. The fortress was quiet. The fires had been put out. The wounded were healing. She thought about the girl who'd left Black Hollow in the middle of the night, desperate, alone, with no plan beyond a way. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who'd walked through fire and come out forged instead of broken. She'd lost a marriage, but she'd found herself. And that, she thought, was worth everything. Behind her, a knock came at the door. She turned. "Come in." Rylan stepped inside, holding 2 cups. "Thought you could use this." He handed her one. It smelled like spiced wine. "Thanks." They stood in silence for a moment, drinking. "You did good today," Rylan said. "So did you." He smiled. "We make a decent team." "Yeah, we do." He raised his cup. "To new beginnings." Lena raised hers. "To building something that lasts." They drank, and somewhere in the distance, the bond finally went silent. The silence where the bond used to be felt like relief. Lena woke the next morning with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. No phantom pull toward the west, no ache in her chest, just quiet. She dressed quickly, braided her hair, and headed to the archives before the sun fully rose. Corvin was already there, hunched over a stack of territorial maps. "You're early again," he said without looking up. "So are you." "Can't sleep when there's work to do." He gestured to a pile on her desk. "New trade proposals from the eastern settlements. Raylan wants your assessment by tomorrow." Lena sat down and got to work. The hours passed quickly, the rhythm familiar and grounding. She flagged 3 deals that overcommitted resources, renegotiated terms on 2 others, and approved the rest with detailed notes. By midday, she'd cleared the stack. Corvin glanced over. "You're fast." "I'm efficient." He almost smiled. "There's a difference?" "Not if you're doing it right." She brought the proposals to Rylan that afternoon. He was in the war room with Captain Jace and Marin, studying patrol routes along the western border. "These are solid," Rylan said after reviewing her notes. "Better than solid. You just saved us from 3 potential disasters. Just doing my job. Your job's keeping this territory functional." He looked up. "I need you at the next council meeting. We're discussing expansion into the northern valleys, and I want your input on the costs." Lena nodded. "I'll be there." As she turned to leave, Marin called out, "Hey, Vierick." Lena stopped. Marin crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "You handled yourself well with the Red Ridge deal, and you didn't flinch when things got ugly. That takes guts." "Thanks. Don't let it go to your head, but don't forget it either." Marin's eyes were sharp. "You've got a spine. Use it." Lena almost smiled. "I will." She left feeling lighter than she had in weeks. The days that followed fell into a pattern that felt almost normal. Lena worked long hours in the archives, reviewing contracts and financial reports. She ate meals in the common hall with the other staff, listening to their conversations without contributing much. She walked the fortress walls at night when sleep wouldn't come, watching the stars and thinking about how far she'd traveled. The other women in her quarters had stopped treating her like a stranger. Kira, the supply clerk, started saving her a seat at meals. Met asked her opinion on a trade dispute she was documenting. It was small, but it mattered. She was becoming part of something. One evening, as Lena was finishing up in the archives, Saren appeared in the doorway. "Rylan wants to see you." Lena looked up. "Now?" "Yes, in his office." She followed Saren through the corridors, her mind racing through possibilities. Had she made a mistake in the reports? Missed something critical? When she entered Rylan's office, he was standing at the window, hands clasped behind his back. "You wanted to see me?" He turned. "I did. Sit." She sat, her pulse quickening. Rylan moved to his desk and pulled out a leather folder. "I've been thinking about your position here." Lena's stomach tightened. "If this is about Varen's allies, it's not." He opened the folder. "You've been here 4 months. In that time, you've uncovered theft, prevented bad deals, negotiated with hostile factions, and saved this territory more resources than some of my counselors have in years. You were just being excellent at your job, and I want to make it official." He slid a document across the desk. "Chief Auditor of Ironcrest, full authority over all financial and trade matters, a seat at council meetings, a permanent position with a salary that reflects your value." Lena stared at the document. "Rylan, before you say anything, understand that this isn't charity. This is strategy. You're good at what you do, better than good. And I need people like you if this territory is going to survive." She looked up. "What about the council? Half of them still don't trust me." "They will, or they won't. Either way, you've earned this." He leaned forward. "The question is whether you want it." Lena's hands trembled as she picked up the document. Chief Auditor. A real title. A real position. Not handed to her because of her family name or a political marriage, but earned through her own work. "Yes," she said quietly. "I want it." Rylan smiled. "Good. Sign at the bottom." She did, her signature sharp and clear. When she looked up, Rylan extended his hand. "Welcome to the council, Lena." She shook it, warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in her life, she belonged somewhere. The council meeting was 3 days later. Lena arrived early, carrying a leather folder stuffed with projections and cost analyses. The counselors trickled in slowly, some nodding to her, others avoiding her gaze entirely. Varen's former allies still didn't trust her. She could see it in the way they clustered together, whispering behind their hands. But they weren't openly hostile anymore, just wary. That was progress. Rylan opened the meeting with a map spread across the table. "The northern valleys are unclaimed territory," he said. "Rich soil, fresh water, strategic position. If we move now, we can establish settlements before the other territories even realize the opportunity." One of the older counselors, a man named Haldren, frowned. "And what about the cost? Building settlements isn't cheap." "That's why Lena's here," Rylan gestured to her. "She's run the numbers." All eyes turned to her. Lena opened her folder and laid out the projections. "Initial investment is high: timber, labor, supplies. We're looking at approximately 8,000 in silver for the first phase alone. But the valleys produce enough surplus grain to offset costs within 2 years. After that, we're profitable. The third year, we project a return of 15%. 2 years is a long time," another counselor said. "What if the weather turns? What if crops fail?" "I've accounted for that." Lena pulled out a secondary report. "Even with a 20% crop failure rate, we break even in year 3 instead of year 2. The risk is manageable." Haldren leaned back, studying her. "And if the settlements fail entirely?" "They won't. Not if we build them right." She pulled out a detailed construction plan. Phases, timelines, contingencies. "We start small. 10 families in the first wave. Establish infrastructure, prove the concept, then expand. We don't overcommit, we don't rush, we build something sustainable." The room went quiet. Rylan looked around the table. "Any objections?" Haldren shifted in his seat. "It's ambitious, but the numbers are sound." Another counselor nodded. "If we're careful, it could work. Then we move forward." Rylan looked at Lena. "You'll oversee the financial side, work with Jace on logistics and Marin on trade routes." Lena nodded, her pulse quickening. This wasn't just auditing anymore. This was building something new, something that would last, and she was leading it. After the meeting, Haldren approached her in the corridor. "That was impressive," he said quietly. Thank you. I'll admit I had my doubts about you when you first arrived. Runaway wife of a rival alpha, it looked bad. He paused. But you've proven yourself. Not just to Rylan, but to me. That plan was thorough, professional. Better than anything Varen ever produced. Lena met his gaze. I appreciate that. Don't let it go to your head. You've still got enemies on the council, but you've also got allies now. He smiled faintly. Keep doing what you're doing. He walked away, and Lena exhaled slowly. One ally at a time. She could work with that. The northern settlements broke ground 2 weeks later. Lena rode out with Jace and a team of engineers to survey the site. The valleys were beautiful, rolling hills covered in wildflowers, dense forests that whispered in the wind, rivers that sparkled clear and cold in the sunlight. It was harsh land, unforgiving in winter, but it was alive with possibility. She spent 3 days there, walking the terrain with the engineers, reviewing plans, making adjustments on the fly. The head engineer, a gruff woman named Talra, listened to her suggestions without complaint. You've got an eye for this, Talra said on the second day, watching Lena mark adjustments to the irrigation plans. I just see the problems before they happen. That's what I mean. Most people don't think past next week. You're thinking years ahead. Talra grinned. We could use more of that. On the last night, Lena sat by the campfire with Jace and Marin, who'd come along to scout potential trade routes through the mountain passes. You're good at this, Jace said, poking at the flames with a stick. At what? Seeing the whole picture. Most people get caught up in the details, whether the lumber's the right width, whether the wells are deep enough. You see how it all fits together, how one thing affects another? Lena shrugged. Someone has to. Marin snorted. Don't sell yourself short. You've got a gift. Most leaders can't do what you do, balance the immediate needs with the long-term vision. That's rare. I'm not a leader. You are. You just don't see it yet. Marin leaned back, her eyes on the stars. You know, when you first showed up at Ironcrest, I thought you were just another runaway. Someone fleeing a bad situation with no plan and no backbone. I was. Yeah, but you didn't stay that way. Marin's voice was thoughtful. You figured it out, adapted, made yourself useful. Most people can't do that. They break, or they give up. You kept moving. Lena stared into the fire, watching the flames dance. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You just made the hard one, over and over. Marin glanced at her. That takes strength most people don't have. Silence settled over the camp. The fire crackled. An owl called in the distance. Lena thought about the girl who'd left Black Hollow in the middle of the night, terrified, desperate, with nothing but a knife and stubborn pride. That girl had been ready to die in the wilderness rather than stay where she wasn't wanted. That girl was gone now. But she wasn't erased. She was the foundation of who Lena had become. Thanks, Lena said quietly. Marin nodded. Don't mention it. Just keep proving me right. They returned to Ironcrest the next day. Rylan was waiting at the gate, his expression unreadable. How'd it go? Good. The site's solid. Talra's team is ready to start construction as soon as we deliver the supplies. Excellent. He handed her a sealed letter. This came for you while you were gone. Lena took it, frowning at the wax seal. Virek family crest. Her stomach tightened. She broke the seal and read quickly. The letter was short, written in her father's cold, precise hand. Lena, I have been informed of your situation. Your actions have brought shame to our house. You abandoned your duty, violated a sacred alliance, and disgraced the Virek name. You are no longer welcome in our territory. Consider all family ties severed. Do not contact us again. Lord Virek Lena stared at the letter for a long moment. She waited for the hurt to come, the sting of rejection, the weight of loss. It didn't come. Instead, she felt nothing, just a faint, distant relief. She folded the letter carefully and tucked it into her coat. Bad news? Rylan asked. My father disowned me. Rylan's expression darkened. I'm sorry. Don't be. Lena's voice was steady. I stopped being his daughter the day he signed me over to KL, like I was a piece of furniture. This just makes it official. Still, that's not easy. No, but it's not surprising either. She looked up, meeting his gaze. I don't need his approval anymore. I've got work to do. Ryland studied her for a moment, something like respect flickering in his eyes. All right, get some rest. Council meets again tomorrow, and we've got trade negotiations with the southern outposts. Lena nodded and walked to her quarters, her chest tight but her head clear. She'd lost her family, her marriage, the life she'd been raised to live. But she'd gained something better, a purpose, a place, a future she'd built with her own hands, and that was worth more than any family name. 3 months passed in a blur of activity. The northern settlements took shape, cabins rising from cleared land, storage buildings framed and roofed, irrigation channels dug and tested. The first families arrived, nervous but hopeful, and Lena met with each one personally, explaining the plans and answering questions. The first harvest exceeded projections by 12%. The trade routes Marin helped establish brought in revenue faster than expected, and the settlements became profitable 6 months ahead of schedule. Lena's reputation grew beyond Ironcrest's borders. Counselors who'd once dismissed her now sought her advice on financial planning and resource management. Traders from other territories asked to meet with her specifically, knowing she'd negotiate fairly but firmly. Ryland relied on her judgment for every major decision, and the council meetings became collaborations rather than arguments. She was no longer an outsider. She was indispensable, but not everyone was happy about it. One evening, Lena was walking back from the archives when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and found 3 figures blocking the corridor, former allies of Varen, all of them counselors she'd clashed with during meetings. The leader, a man named Torvin, stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. "You've gotten comfortable," he said. Lena kept her voice even. "I'm just doing my job." "Your job? Right," he sneered. "You're an outsider playing at being one of us, and Ryland's too blind to see it. If you have an issue with my work, take it up with him." "We're taking it up with you." Torvin moved closer, and the 2 men behind him spread out, blocking her escape routes. "You don't belong here. You're Cale Thorne's cast-off. A runaway with no family, no allies, no right to be sitting on our council." Lena's jaw tightened. "I've heard that before. From people smarter than you. And I'm still here." Torvin's face flushed. "You think you're untouchable because Ryland backs you? That won't last forever. He'll get tired of you, realize you're a liability, and when he does, you'll be back where you started, alone and worthless." "Maybe," Lena stepped forward, her voice dropping to ice, "but it'll last longer than your career. I've uncovered theft, stopped a mercenary attack, negotiated peace with hostile factions, and saved this territory more money than you've generated in a decade. So if you want to challenge me, bring proof that I've done something wrong. Otherwise, get out of my way." Torvin stared at her, rage flickering in his eyes. For a moment, she thought he might actually swing. Then he stepped aside. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Yes, it is," Lena said, and walked past him without looking back. Her hands were shaking by the time she reached her quarters, but she didn't let it show. She locked the door, sat on the edge of her bed, and forced herself to breathe slowly. She'd face down worse than Torvin, and she'd do it again if she had to. Winter came early that year, blanketing the valleys in snow and turning the landscape into something harsh and beautiful. The northern settlements hunkered down, their stores full, their structures solid against the wind. The trade routes stayed open, caravans moving slowly but steadily through the mountain passes. Lena spent most of her days in the war room, working alongside Ryland on plans for spring expansion. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm over the months. She'd crunch numbers and flag problems. He'd make decisions and handle the politics. It worked. One evening, as they finalized plans for a new trade agreement with a territory to the east, Ryland leaned back in his chair and studied her. "You ever think about what comes next?" Lena looked up from her notes. "What do you mean?" "After this, after we stabilize the territory, after the settlements are self-sufficient and the trade routes are running smoothly." He tilted his head. "What do you want?" She hesitated. "I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead." "You should. You've built something here, Lena. Something real. Don't let it stop at logistics and ledgers." "What else is there?" "Leadership, influence, a voice that people listen to when decisions are made." He smiled slightly. "You've already got the respect." Now you need to decide what to do with it. Lena frowned. I'm not a leader. I'm an auditor. You're both. You just don't see it yet. Ryland stood, stretching. Think about it. We're planning a summit in the spring. Representatives from all the Eastern Territories coming here to discuss trade, borders, alliances. I want you there, not as my auditor, as my advisor, my equal at the table. Ryland, you've earned it, Lena. Stop acting like you haven't. He walked to the door, then paused. And stop waiting for permission to be who you are. You're better than that. He left before she could respond. Lena sat alone in the war room, staring at the maps spread across the table. Advisor. The word felt foreign, dangerous, but it also felt right. The summit was held in early spring when the snow melted and the valleys turned green again. Representatives from 6 territories gathered in Ironcrest's Great Hall. Alphas, counselors, trade masters, all of them ambitious and calculating. The air buzzed with tension and careful diplomacy. Lena stood at Ryland's side, wearing formal council robes and carrying a folder of prepared notes. She'd spent weeks getting ready for this, memorizing trade figures, studying each territory's strengths and weaknesses, anticipating arguments. The discussion started civil but turned heated quickly. Border disputes that had simmered for years. Resource allocation that everyone claimed was unfair. Trade tariffs that benefited some territories at the expense of others. Lena watched, listened, and waited for her moment. It came during a particularly brutal argument over grain distribution. One of the alphas, a sharp-eyed woman named Kellen from the southeastern territories, was demanding a larger share based on population size. Another alpha, Garrett from the north, argued that his territory's military support to border defense entitled him to priority access. They were going in circles, voices rising, neither willing to compromise. Ryland glanced at Lena. She nodded and stepped forward. The issue isn't population or military contribution, she said. Her voice cut through the noise, calm and precise. It's infrastructure. Some territories can't store the grain they're requesting. It'll spoil before they can use it. Kellen frowned. That's not... I've reviewed the storage capacities for every territory at this table. Lena pulled out a detailed chart. Your territory can hold half of what you're requesting, Kellen. Garrett's can hold even less. If we distribute grain based on actual capacity and projected consumption rates, everyone gets what they need without waste or shortages. The room went quiet. Garrett leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. And who decides those rates? I do, based on verified data from each territory's supply masters. Lena met his gaze without flinching. Unless you'd prefer to keep arguing while grain rots in transit and people go hungry because of politics. Garrett's mouth twitched. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Fair point. I'll take your numbers. Kellen studied Lena for a long moment, then nodded slowly. So will I. The tension in the room broke. The distribution plan was settled within the hour, and the summit moved on to other matters. Later, as the representatives took a break, Kellen approached Lena in the corridor. That was impressive, she said. Thank you. You're Ryland's advisor? I am. Kellen's expression was thoughtful. I heard stories about you before I came here. The runaway bride who walked into enemy territory with nothing and somehow made herself indispensable. I thought they were exaggerating. Lena's jaw tightened. I'm not defined by who I left. No, you're defined by what you built after. Kellen extended her hand. If you ever want to visit my territory, you're welcome. We could use someone with your insight on our council. The offer's genuine. Lena shook her hand, surprised. I'll keep that in mind. As Kellen walked away, Marin appeared at Lena's shoulder. Making friends in high places, she observed. Just doing my job. Your job's turning into something bigger than auditing ledgers. Marin's voice was serious. You know that, right? People are starting to see you as more than Ryland's advisor. They're seeing you as a power in your own right. Lena's chest tightened. I don't want power. Doesn't matter what you want. You've got it anyway. Marin studied her. Question is, what are you going to do with it? Lena didn't have an answer. That night, after the summit concluded and the representatives departed, Lena stood on the fortress walls, looking out over the valley. The settlements glowed in the distance, small points of light against the darkness, proof that something could be built from nothing. that survival could turn into something more. Rylan joined her, carrying 2 cups of spiced wine. "You did well today," he said, handing her one. "Thanks." Kellen wasn't the only one impressed. "I had 3 other representatives ask me about you. Who you are, where you came from, what your plans are." Lena took a sip of wine. "What did you tell them?" "That you're the smartest person in this territory, and they'd be lucky to work with you." He leaned against the stone wall. "Kellen's offer was real, you know. She's looking for a chief advisor, someone who can handle the complexities of running a growing territory." "I'm not leaving Ironcrest." "I know, but the fact that she asked means you've got options now, recognition, a reputation that extends beyond our borders." He paused. "You've come a long way from the woman who showed up at my gate looking half-starved and desperate." Lena smiled faintly. "That woman seems like a different person." "She is. You're not running anymore. You're building, leading." He raised his cup. "To proving everyone wrong." Lena raised hers. "To building something that lasts." They drank in comfortable silence, watching the lights in the valley. After a moment, Rylan spoke again, his voice quieter. "Kyle sent another letter last week." Lena's hand tightened on her cup. "What did it say?" "That he's heard about your work here, about the settlements, the summit, your position on the council. He said he's proud of you." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Proud." His word, not mine. "He doesn't get to be proud. He doesn't get to have any opinion about what I do or who I've become." Her voice was hard. "He made his choice. I made mine. What he thinks about it now doesn't matter." "I know. I just thought you should know he's aware of what you've accomplished." "Good. Let him see what he threw away." Lena looked out at the valley. "Let him see that I didn't need him, that I built this myself." Rylan nodded. "For what it's worth, I think he knows. And I think it's eating him alive." Lena felt nothing at that. No satisfaction, no vindication, just emptiness where anger used to be. She'd moved on, and Kyle was just a name from a life she didn't live anymore. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for giving me a chance when no one else would." "You earned it, every step." Rylan's voice was firm. "You're not just an advisor, Lena. You're family, to this territory, to me. Don't forget that." Her throat tightened. "I won't." He clinked his cup against hers. "Good. Now get some sleep. We've got the spring planning schedules to review tomorrow, and I need your brain sharp." She watched him leave, warmth spreading through her chest despite the cold night air. She'd come to Ironcrest with nothing, and now she had everything that mattered. 6 months later, the council voted unanimously to grant Lena a permanent seat, not as chief auditor, as a full counselor with equal voice and equal authority. She stood in the great hall, surrounded by the same people who'd once seen her as a threat, and took the oath. Her voice was steady. Her hands didn't shake. When it was done, Rylan clasped her shoulder. "Welcome to the council, Counselor Viereck." Lena smiled. "I've been part of this council for a while now. Now it's official." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "And between you and me, you're the best decision I've made since taking this position." That night, Lena sat in her quarters, a proper room now, with a desk and bookshelves and a window that overlooked the valley, and pulled out the letter from her father. She read it one last time, the words as cold and dismissive as ever. Then she fed it to the fire in her hearth. The flames consumed it quickly, turning the parchment to ash and smoke. She didn't need his approval, didn't need anyone's approval. She was Lena Viereck, Counselor of Ironcrest, and she'd built this life herself, one decision at a time. 1 year after leaving Black Hollow, Lena stood in the northern settlements, watching workers raise the frame of a new meeting hall. The settlement had grown beyond anyone's expectations. 70 families now, with more arriving every month. The fields were lush and green, the children were healthy and loud. The trade routes brought steady income, and the settlers had started their own small council to handle local disputes. It was thriving. Marin rode up beside her, dismounting with a grunt. "Looks good." "It does." "You should be proud. This whole thing exists because you saw the opportunity and convinced everyone else it was worth the risk." Lena smiled. "We all built it together." "Don't be modest. It doesn't suit you." Marin studied her. "You're different than you were a year ago." "How?" "Stronger, settled, like you finally figured out who you are and stopped apologizing for it. Marin's voice was approving. The world needs more people like that. People who know who they are and don't back down. Lena thought about that. About the girl who'd fled Black Hollow in the dark, convinced she was worthless because one man had treated her that way. That girl was gone. But she wasn't forgotten. She was the reason Lena fought so hard now, the reason she refused to be invisible ever again. Yeah, Lena said quietly, I did figure it out. Good. Marin clapped her on the shoulder. Now don't screw it up. They stood in silence, watching the settlement bustle with activity. And Lena realized something she'd never quite understood before. She'd spent her whole life waiting to be chosen. By her family, who'd traded her away. By Kael, who'd never wanted her. By someone, anyone, who would tell her she mattered. But she didn't need that anymore. She'd chosen herself. And that was the only choice that had ever really mattered. As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Lena turned and walked back toward the settlement hall. There was work to do, plans to review, problems to solve. And she was ready. Not because someone told her she could be, but because she'd proven it to herself. She was no longer the discarded wife of an alpha who'd never valued her. She was Lena Viereck, counselor, builder, survivor. And this was just the beginning.